Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Polyhedron Cluttercast episode 34, the Kickstarter special.
Bum 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 bum.
I'm Steve Tudor.
What the hell was that?
It's just Steve introducing himself. Oh, the bum bum bum. I
Yeah,
thought it was
that
dramatic.
bit, yeah. That's...
It was the Crystal Maze music.
It was.
That's what it was.
Is Richard O'Brien going to run around now playing a harmonica, talking about Mumsy?
I'm Mumsy. Or John Cage, I suppose, if you prefer.
I'm Steve Tudor Pole.
Does that make me Richard O'Brien? I better shave my head. And I'm Andy. Steve Tudor Pole.
Smooth.
That was good. Got to give him that one.
So we're not doing a normal episode today. What we're going to do is, rather than what we usually do if you're a regular listener, is we talk about the games we played, and then we usually either pick a discussion topic or we will answer questions from the mailbag. But what we're going to do today is we're just going to do the kind of discussion topic questions from the mailbag, mainly because I want to record a slightly shorter episode so I don't have to spend the next 12 hours locked in a room editing.
Are you suggesting that the content that Andy and I provide is subpar?
I think that's exactly what he's suggesting, John, yeah.
Yeah, it's a fair cop. I can't defend that.
We should take him outside and have a word.
I was trying to save waves of buttering it up and say, no, it's just all about, finessing the audio tweaks. And it's like, no, I'm just cutting out all the
I was going to say.
really
No, it
unnecessary
isn't.
waffle.
What it is, it's basically laziness. That's what it is. Steve can't be asked to edit a 2.5-hour podcast. That's basically what it comes down to.
I'd like to see daylight in the next 3 days is basically what it is.
You're a board gamer. You're not designed to see daylight.
I'm a Welsh board gamer.
Plus, you've got red hair. You'd fry like a vampire if you opened the curtains.
It's better you stay in, Steve.
I've got to be careful. I don't want to get moonburned.
The hell is moonburn?
Oh, I've made a tactical error, boys.
What's that?
Have you not pressed record again?
No, I am recording. Not that tactical error.
Yeah,
Worse.
we need a wee.
No.
Or we ran out of beer.
I've not run out of beer. I've put the beer on my counter and it's out of reach. Jeeves, bring my beer, sir.
Sounds like a problem you could overcome without the listeners knowing.
Could. Now I've ruined the magic, though. I reckon it's good listening. The rabbit holes are apparently very popular.
Get your beer then. Come on.
There we go. I'm double fisting, as the Americans would say.
Oh, God, and he's off.
Seriously, they do. It's true. My friend Steph I was talking to, she's from Pittsburgh. She's a fan of the Steelers, for anyone who follows NFL. And I came back from the bar with a pint in each hand. And she said, Andy, you're double fisting. I sort of looked at her and went, what? She says, you're double fisting. I said, you mean I'm double parked? She says, yeah. Why? I said, that double fisting does not mean that over here. She just sort of looks at me and says, what does it mean? I'll tell you later.
Google it, but not at work.
Yes.
The Americans in a lot of these craft beer places, you can go buy beer in a large jug. And the large jug is called a growler. So when somebody says, oh, yeah, I brought a 4-pint growler home with me.
Wow.
Does not mean what you think it means.
Oh, good grief. Oh, the differences in language.
Fun and games. So, we're going to talk about Kickstarter, right?
We are going to talk about Kickstarter because it's something me and Andy have been saying we're going to talk about for some time, actually, and I think it requires a dedicated episode because it's a big subject and
Controversial
in many ways as well, yeah.
It's bigger than Jesus and bigger than wrestling.
What about Jesus wrestling a tiger made of lightning? Is it bigger than that? Because that would be pretty awesome, actually.
Maybe not that big.
Okay, maybe not that. So just in case you are listening to this podcast and do not know what Kickstarter is, because it does happen, Kickstarter is a crowdfunding platform and quite possibly the biggest crowdfunding platform out there. Now what that is people go on there and say they want to do something. And I remember when Kickstarter first started, it was usually things like, oh, a band want to record an album. So they want to record an album and studio time costs a lot of money. So what they did is they said, right, studio time costs $5,000. We want to raise $5,000 to record an album. And everyone who gives us money will get a copy of the CD at the end of it.
Fair.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the gist was for people who maybe don't have some kind of financial backing around them, so music artists that aren't on a contract can get their fans to help them achieve things. And of course, it exploded from there.
Personally, I wish that Kickstarter was around quite some time ago, about 8 years ago, when I started a small business making LED glow poi. So poi, if you've never seen them before, like these things, you see people like spinning fire around themselves at festivals.
It's a glow stick in a sock.
Yeah, pretty much. That's basically what I made. It's a really bright programmable glow stick in a sock. And there were a lot of people at the time that were really excited about this because, well, LEDs and stuff were kind of new, and certainly having something this bright in a sock that basically looked like you're swinging two lightsabers around yourself. It still looks cool. But to try and get something like that off the ground when you've got like a full-time job and all the rest of it, and you don't really know whether the market's there, if you could say, if 300 people are willing to spend this much money on these things and that critical mass is guaranteed and I get that money to invest, then I can build these things. That's a really cool idea because all these people get some stuff they wanted and I get a chance to do this stuff without risking an enormous amount of capital that I had to somehow raise. So, yeah, it's a really cool model, I think.
Mm.
And that's really what it was set up to do. I mean, you've described Kickstarter perfectly there, or at least the initial concept of Kickstarter.
Mm.
There's a couple of key things you said there. I mean, you said you don't know how many people would want these, and I said I've mentioned the kind of gig system. I think I heard somebody say originally Kickstarter was actually set up because somebody wanted to do a rave and just wanted to raise money to get a venue, get a DJ, get sound equipment, and that kind of thing.
Yeah, it was definitely an event, yeah.
But it's been taken on by the board gaming industry, and I mean, I got first introduced to it about 5 years ago, I think now. And basically, board gaming has lapped up Kickstarter more than any other industry. Because I think even 4 years ago, the video game industry started to latch onto it. But they've more or less left it now. Because the video game Kickstarters are nowhere near as big as they were in the past, but the board gaming Kickstarters, board games happen to be some of the biggest projects on Kickstarter.
Really?
It's a good fit, I think.
Yeah, because it's that whole thing. It's a niche hobby. We'd like to think that loads of people like board gaming, but board gaming is a niche hobby. Mm-hmm. So you've got a limited audience, and you need it's an idea, and it's one also. Unlike video games, which now take several people many years to code, you can more or less make a board game, at home. Pen, paper, bit of cardboard, sticky back plastic. Off you go. You can start making prototypes.
As we covered in a previous podcast, like last episode, I think it was. Well, no, I suppose it'll be the one before now because we're doing anyway. But a couple of episodes ago, we covered.
John is a continuity nightmare.
He's chipping away at that fourth wall with a hammer and chisel.
He is chipping away. I just put my foot through it.
Yeah, as you said, there's a wrecking ball just been thrown at it.
Look, I've only got a simple brain, all right? Anyway, the point was, one of our friends came up with a board game and just scribbled it down on some paper, and it was fun for half an hour for 4 people who knew the content. You're right. You can put together a board game with not an awful lot of like the very basic sort of stuff. You can put it together very easily. When you try and produce a polished product for 100,000 people to enjoy, that's a different venture.
It is indeed.
We say 100,000. It's an interesting number because it used to be 5 years ago, 5,000 copies of a board game was a big print run.
Yeah.
And so, people were operating out of their sheds, basically. I mean, like Ragnar Brothers are still a company that basically operates out of their shed. So
sheds are nice.
You think 5,000, if you're going to make 1,000 copies of a board game, you want to basically know you can sell 500 of them off the bat. So Kickstarter really got taken on board by board gaming. A couple of things also happened. Stretch goals. My understanding from Mr. Stegmaier and his blog is that stretch goals more or less came from board games.
Okay.
They invented that concept. So that was the idea of the stretch goal was, okay, we need £5,000, say, to make this board game and publish it. But if we get £10,000, we can make all the dice custom dice. If we get £20,000, we can upgrade to a thicker cardstock. And then that's when it first started, and it got more advanced with you look at the latest Cool Mini or Not Kickstarter, it's whole swaves of extra miniatures and tokens and missions and expansions that get added on these. As a little kind of footnote, when I first got into Kickstarter, or first started to notice it, Kickstarter was actually illegal in the UK.
Oh, yes, you've mentioned this before, haven't you? Didn't we talk about this with James Hudson from Grim Forest?
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's different over there.
It's actually, I'd say it's different over here. The UK is the odd one out a little bit on this. And what it is that crowdfunding is still illegal in the UK. But what it is crowdfunding for the point of trying to protect the investor, which is illegal. Because investment in a company has to go through certain safeguards and checks so that you're not being fleeced, basically. It's anti-scamming laws, basically. But crowdfunding originally was people basically buying a share in the company by putting up the money up front.
Sure. Doesn't it come down to also potential sale of goods as well over here? That it's essentially a pre-order. So in the UK, if you pre-order something, you're entitled to the goods.
I think that was the crux of it.
I think so. I mean, I'm not a legal expert on this, but I know when the announcement came out, they said there's an exception being made for product-based crowdfunding where you are backing a product, which therefore suggests it then becomes a sale, so it's sale of goods. So, but I'd need that confirmed. I'm not entirely sure if that's true, but I don't think it's ever been tested either, is the thing. I don't think anyone's taken a kick in the UK. I don't think anyone's taken a Kickstarter credit to court to find out.
I've certainly not seen it in the news.
No. Although, given some of the projects that are running a couple of years late, I can't imagine it's going to be too far behind before someone gets pissed off.
You can't deny Kickstarter is a big thing because, as I said, Kickstarter has been... The board games on Kickstarter are probably the biggest section. And I think apart from the Pebble Watch... I think like the top 5 Kickstarters in the history of Kickstarter have all been board games.
Yes, I'd imagine Exploding Kittens, Simon must have one
Death
or two.
Monster, yeah, Rising Sun,
yeah,
they're all absolutely massive things.
Millions of pounds.
So we can't deny it's a massive thing, and there's a lot of games come out on Kickstarter. I mean, I used to do like a weekly roundup on Polyhedron Collider of Kickstarter projects that were interesting. And I think at times, because there used to be a website that doesn't exist anymore where you could actually filter Kickstarters by category and dates and things like that, I think there was 200 Kickstarters on at one point in the tabletop games category.
It's bonkers, isn't it?
Now, a third of them were different playing cards, but the rest of them were board games, miniatures games, dice games, card games, and role-playing games, So you can say about 120 board games at one time on Kickstarter.
That's more than even Andy could back.
Yes. But not that he'd want to back. I'd probably back at least 115 of them if I could afford it. Actually, to be fair, that's not true. I'm very choosy when it comes to my Kickstarters, despite my approach to... Yeah, very much so.
I don't believe you.
It's true!
How many do you look at then?
Quite a lot, actually. I do spend quite a lot of time pissing him out on Kickstarter. There are a few I've actually pulled out of as well.
Sorry.
Even I thought it was a gimmick. That's how ropey it must have been.
Yeah, after you'd already backed it once and then decided to back out.
And then backed it again and then backed out.
If you pulled out twice, I mean, that's a bad sign, isn't it?
It is. Actually, I did that on Star Scrappers as well. I pulled out twice from that. And I still ended up backing it, and it's on its way.
How am I the only one seeing the innuendo? That's fine.
No, you're not. I'm just ignoring it and giving it the contempt it deserves, Mr. Cage. For now.
You're ignoring innuendo?
I am.
What have you done with Andy?
I've got my sensible hat on for the moment.
Crikey. You've got one of those?
Yes. It's not my convention hat, it's my sensible hat.
What shape is it?
It's a trilby.
Interesting.
For now. I might get the sombrero out later. That's definitely not a sensible hat.
That's more like the Kickstarter hat.
Exactly.
Kickstarter. About Kickstarter.
So, obviously, you have backed some Kickstarters, Mr. Lewis.
1 or 2. 30, actually, as it happens.
30?
30
wow,
in total.
I've actually backed more than you.
There you go, you see, and I'm the one who gets all the stick. It's just I've done it in less than 2 years and you've done it in 7.
Yes. I've backed 32 Kickstarters, and the first Kickstarter I backed was in 2013. So it's 4 years.
Which one was it?
That was the War Machines Tactics Kickstarter.
And have you received it?
Yes.
Oh, wow. There we go.
It was a video game. In fact, I've got 3 copies of it in Steam.
Ah, excellent.
I need to gift you each a copy.
3 copies? Bloody hell.
I'm okay with that.
I will beat you at it, I've decided.
Obviously, you've backed 30-odd Kickstarters, Mr. Lewis. I've backed 30-odd. How many Kickstarters have you backed, Mr.
I'm
Cage?
just Googling as fast as I can.
I reckon it's about 3.
It's not...
Because you've
more than
backed City of Kings, we know that.
Yeah. I backed some Osic X headphones that I don't think I'm ever going to see. They keep sending me loving updates about how they've done amazing stuff in their factory, to which I keep thinking, just give me the bloody headphones. I don't give a shit about how much you're all enjoying your lives as developers and how much you've improved the product. I still haven't got my product.
So this is how we're spending your money this week.
Pretty much, yeah. They must have spent it years ago, because it's like a year and a half, maybe 2 years.
Bloody hell.
What have your experiences been then, Mr. Lewis? Positive or negative?
Generally quite positive, to be fair. But I had this rather facetious discussion in the board game group a while ago where I was actually a bit, condescending, like my usual self, where a lot of people were whinging that some of their games were late and all this sort of stuff. And I just turned around and thought, well, maybe I'm just better at weeding out the shite. Because, again, I think it just comes down to, we discussed this, time before, where I just seem to have a knack of weeding out, just looking at it thinking, well, that looks bollocks, I'm not backing that. And generally, I seem to be right. However, my pristine record may have been tarnished last night.
You've got a pristine record, Andy.
Well, in the sense that none of the Kickstarters I've received so far have been turds.
Okay, yeah.
And I believe most of the ones you've backed have come in reasonably on time as well, have they?
Yes, there's a couple that have been a little bit late. Nothing outrageous. And the latest one I think I've got currently is Hope, which is the thick end of 12 months late at this point. But basically the company had a complete restructure, got bought out by somebody else. Lots of other staff came in and they've essentially restarted the project. So, but to be fair, they have been upfront and honest about it, and they are making some reasonable progress now. So it's not the end of the world. But yeah, it's about a year late at the moment. Most of the Kickstarters I've received have been on time. One of them was actually technically 3 days early. Or, maybe a month behind schedule, so nothing outrageous. I think the latest one I received was about 3 months late so far, which again is a little annoying but not dreadful. But there are a couple that are, say, ongoing at the moment that are between 6 and 12 months late, but not many. Most of them, it's been pretty positive. But yeah, I've not, in my eyes, received a steaming turd as yet, apart from last night, where I played Dream Wars for the first time with our board game group in Worcester. And the response
First impression?
Well, the first impression was not positive, shall we say. I'm really desperately trying to like it, but I can't disagree with any of the criticism levelled at it so far. I think me and Nye are going to give it another go, because we took a long time trying to learn the rules. There's a lot to it. For anyone who doesn't know, it's basically a steampunk horror game, not unlike Arkham, actually, which is obviously not steampunk, but the same sort of idea. You get big bads and things being summoned and all that sort of stuff, but you get steampunk technology to try and take them out. But
conceptually sounds pretty cool.
Exactly, this is why I bought it. It sounds and looks beautiful, and it sounds great, and really thematically, to be fair, I think it's really quite nice. And when I first read the rulebook, I thought, this makes perfect sense, this is great. Then we played the game, and there are so many ambiguities and contradictions in some of the cards and against the rules and what constitutes a movement and all this sort of stuff. And we spent most of the time pissing about in the rulebook than we did playing the bloody game. So
it sounds a lot like my and Steve's experience of Killforth.
Yeah, I've obviously got to play it again, and the thing is, it's scenario based, and there's a continuing story arc for each of the big bads. So it's possible that we only played like the first scenario for one of the bad guys. I'm hoping it ramps up because we all found it quite straightforward and really easy, and we didn't feel like Killforth that you guys talked about. There wasn't really much of a threat at any point. We just kind of kept the bad guys at bay without any real effort. Went for the main objective, completed it, and then finished the game, much to the delight of everybody. Thank Christ that shit's over. I have to say, I am disappointed at the moment. So yes, very much like Killforth. But again, me and Nye are determined, if nothing else, to give it another go. Now we know the rules, or most of them anyway, because there are a lot of them. We're going to give it another go, so watch this space. But at the moment, it is the most disappointing one I've received. But holy shit, it's stunning.
Maybe it's just a really deep game and you just need to take a lot of time to absorb it.
I'm hoping that's the case, to be fair. And not just because I'm desperately trying to like it, but there is a lot to it, to be fair. And we've basically scratched the surface. I mean, the developers said that there's supposed to be something like 500 hours of gameplay in there because there's like 9 or 10 big bads and there's like 6 or 8 scenarios per bad guy, and each scenario takes half an hour to an hour to play. So there's tons and tons and tons of stuff in there. So I'm hoping it gets better the more you play it, but we'll see. There is a flavour of move to place, roll dice to kill bad guy, and then do something else. So that point of it is a little tedious, but there's a lot of items in it, and I'm hoping some of the stories get a little more exciting. So we'll see.
Fingers crossed then.
Yeah.
So we've had a few questions. We put questions out regarding this subject of Kickstarter, and you've answered half of Mr. Philip James Harker's question, which was, which Kickstarter do you regret buying? Have you got a Kickstarter you regret, Mr. Cage?
Yes, I have dug through and I've backed 4 Kickstarters.
So my guess of 3 wasn't too far away. Wow.
50% of which are board games. So
what's the other one then? Because you've backed City of Kings, like me, funnily enough.
Yeah.
What's the other one?
The other one was Ominos.
Oh, yes, of course.
So I regret 0 of my board game related Kickstarters. Those headphones,
though. One of them.
Those headphones, though. Oh my God. So they successfully funded on April the 21st, 2016. And they're now saying they reckon they might ship them in January next year.
Wow.
So they're going to be basically 2 years late, I reckon. The annoying thing is that I backed them because I thought 3D headphones calibrated to me, that sounds like a really cool thing. And I've got like my PlayStation VR that I've just thinking about buying, as I was back then. I'm bored of it now.
Really? It was great fun when you brought that into the office. I really enjoyed that. And incidentally completely cleaned up on the shooting range because everyone else was shit.
It makes me sick. That's the problem.
Well, if you don't want it, I will happily take it off your hands.
Flying around in space makes me sick. That's the bottom line. I really just need more like first person, not moving around with a joystick. There's one Farpoint's really good actually, where you've got an actual gun and you can like move it around in the game and you can see it moving around. Like you move it around in reality rather, and you can see it moving around in the game.
That's quite cool.
That works really well.
Did you ever play Descent?
Yeah.
On the PC years ago.
Yeah.
Did you get sick with that as well? Because that's full 360 movement. Oh, you're all right with that way? Because a lot of people got motion sickness with that.
No, it's the immersion because you've got no cues that you can hold against.
Sure.
It's still one of the biggest problems in VR. So yeah, I don't regret any board gaming backs that I've made in Kickstarter. Just
because you've only received one of them and it's quite good.
Yeah, and I have a lot of faith in Frank and City of Kings. I think that's going to be amazing.
I was talking to Frank actually. I think it was this morning actually. About we were talking about something else about actually City of Games and a couple of other things, and incidentally, another Kickstarter related issue because he's funding some of that through Kickstarter. I won't go into big details, but basically, I started talking to him about that. But I basically just threw in a facetious comment and said, "So where's City of Kings then, Frank?" And it turns out actually it's completely on schedule. We're going to be shipping it soon.
It's going to be shipping early. It's going to be shipping here in time for Christmas. Woohoo!
Pretty much, but he turned around and said, yeah, much to the surprise of my shippers, they weren't expecting it. It's like, oh no, we didn't plan for you to be on time. I said, what? Of all the things in the world you'd expect a shipper to be happy something was on schedule. But he says, no. I said,
so
wow,
used to it.
Kickstarter in on-track shocker. But that was good. So yeah, that's very exciting that Frank is pulling a blinder there, really.
I have to say, like, of all the Kickstarters and they are limited, obviously, that I've been involved with, his is by far and away the right way to do it. So you give reasonable updates, but nothing that's just, making a post for the sake of it. There are little apologies where there's been a delay, but each time there's an apology, there's something in there saying, and this is what we're going to do about it. This is what you can expect, rather than just, we've screwed up. It's going to be really late. It's going to be later. It's going to be later. It's going to be, here's some fluffy stuff to try and distract you.
I have to admit, it's a fair point because he's not the only one that does that, and some of the better run Kickstarters I've received have the same approach. They'll say, actually, do you know what? We've screwed up, but this is what we're going to do to correct it, or we're going to throw in some free stuff because we've got extra money or whatever it is. This war reminded that, actually. They chucked in some extra stuff just because they could, which was nice of them. You've paid a lot of money for this. We've got a bit of surplus budget. We're going to give you a set of custom dice each. Oh, nice one. Cheers. Which was nice. One of the ones we're waiting on that is really late at the moment is a bunch of, actually, Cthulhu dice. Steve, you missed out on this one.
Oh,
they're stunning. Well, if they ever show up. They were supposed to show up in something like July, but they keep saying, oh, well, we weren't happy with, the first cut of dice images we got, and then they've done a second, and then a third, and there's like one of them they're still not happy with. And it's like, for the love of God! But I have to know that the people they're dealing with in China are also, coincidentally, another company, as another Kickstarter is having trouble with as well. I'm like, there's a constant. So I won't name the company, but there are a couple of constants, shall we say. So, Steve, you've
yeah.
Well, you've mentioned the odd turd in your time. Have you got any of those through Kickstarter?
Yeah.
He says with just resignation.
Is it over 50%, Steve?
It's getting close.
Oh dear.
Jesus, really? Your selection process is really poor.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to sit you down and go through, your business improvement process.
Ironically, the first few Kickstarters I backed, I was quite risk averse, so I only went for the cheap ones because I didn't like this idea of backing something like 70 quid and on an unknown concept.
You see, buy cheap, buy twice, Steve.
Well, yeah. So, I think the worst one I think I've backed, and it's not a truly awful game. It was just a bit boring. Was a game called Dragon Slayer.
That sounds terrible.
Which is a dice. That sounds terrible. It's called Dragon Slayer.
Exactly. It could have been made in the 80s, for Christ's sake.
It sounds alright.
But it should have been made in the 80s. Is it shit, Steve? Is it shit?
It's a dice game.
So it's shit then. Okay.
Yeah, you just got to try. Yeah, I've played it once and went.
Meh.
Yeah, all right.
See, I could have told you not to do that. Oh well, never mind. So what is Dragon Slayer then? Is it like just roll dice, totally up? Is it basically Yahtzee?
It's a variation on that. If it's the dice are bespoke dice, and what you're trying to do is, I think there's 4 dice, and you get a dragon's body, dragon's wing, dragon's head, and dragon's tail.
Right.
And you've got different colours that represent the different coloured dragons. And you're supposed to be going off and slaying them. It's one of those kind of push you. It's like a cross between like Yahtzee and a kind of a push your luck kind of game.
Okay.
So you can't re-roll a kind of Yahtzee, but what you're trying to do is to say, right, okay, well the red dragon's the most difficult, but the chances of me getting the higher result on that are less.
Yeah.
So you can either kind of go, right, I'm going to stop rolling now and cut my losses, or I'm going to carry on going. It's simple, it's straightforward, it's
all right.
I gotta admit, it's all right. Yeah, it was a tenner kind of thing, so it's not like I'm massively out of pocket, but
that's €130 like I spent on Dream Wars. Jesus, yeah.
Now the other one I must admit, I backed a game called Machina Arcana, which funnily enough, hang on, wait, let me describe this to you, Andy. It is a steampunk Cthulhu dungeon crawling game.
I have just shot my load. That does sound pretty awesome, actually.
On the face of it, it sounds amazing.
I've never played it.
What?
I think I've never even taken it out of the box.
What?
I'm pretty sure
I
we discussed
received
this
it.
on the previous episode, and we absolutely slated people who did that. I guess at least you
Yeah.
haven't sold it yet.
That's true.
No, I haven't
Give it to
sold
me,
it.
you
I've kept
idiot.
it.
Steampunk Cthulhu?
Why don't we play it together?
I've not even read the rule book.
That's not like you at all.
Right, your license is revoked. Board game guru, no, get out.
Steve, come on, get out. Out the door.
There's mutiny going on here.
That's worse than liking Talisman.
I'm afraid I have to agree with our colleague, Mr. Tudor. I know.
Someone call an ambulance.
Not only have I got my sensible sombrero on, but I've agreed with John. And I've just
Someone's
nearly
gonna
thrown
Photoshop.
another beer all over the floor. Jesus.
Sometimes you have to Photoshop that up. Andy in the sensible sombrero.
Well, given what you've done to me in the past, I'm going to leave it to you, you bastard.
There's a new meme around the corner.
There is. And it's not a Captain Haddock hat for once.
Carrying on Philip's question, which Kickstarter have you regretted not buying?
Cavern Tavern. And Ave Roma.
No, you've bought both of them.
Yeah, I know. I don't regret buying them.
No, that wasn't the question.
That wasn't the question, Mr. Lewis.
Kickstarter you regret not buying. What?
Yes, which Kickstarter did you regret not backing?
Oh. Sorry.
Like the opposite.
Yeah. Do I not regret not... Right, okay, so I've got my dipshit hat on now. It's a good question, actually. I regret not buying.
There's quite a few, actually. I've had non-backers remorse, I think, just as much as I've had backers remorse. So, ages ago, and now I don't regret not backing it, but at the time, I really kicked myself for not doing it, which was Dead Zone, which was halfway between a skirmish game, miniature skirmish game, and a board game by Mantic. I still really like the concept of it, but now I've realised it's a miniature skirmish game and I'm never going to play the damn thing. But I regret not backing that because I did play an early prototype at UK Games Expo when it was on Kickstarter, and I really liked the rules. But for some reason, it was one of those ones, it was like £100 to back it kind of thing, and I just kind of went, no, that's a bit too much for me, especially at the time. At the time, I regretted not backing Sedition Wars, which now I'm glad I didn't back it because everyone said it was rubbish. And I managed to pick it up for £20, so I still got it anyway.
Was it rubbish?
That's another one I've not played.
Oh my God.
Moving on.
You are dreadful, Tudor.
How big is your pile of shame?
My pile of shame is quite large.
Oh, good God. Regret not back it. Well, I could say Scythe, I suppose.
Yeah, Scythe's probably another big one because I saw the final copy of Scythe and what all the nice bling you got
coins
with it.
And materials. But, in the long run, I've just spent, 4 times more on all of the bling boxes and all the expansions. It's fine.
See, that's a weird one with Scythe because the game came out in retail and is readily available.
Yes.
So the regret isn't as strong because you can still get hold of that game.
Yeah, this is the thing. It's like... Jamie runs his projects properly, you see. He knows what he's doing. And all of his games have been released and have been available to buy pretty much immediately after the Kickstarter's finished. It's not one of these where, like a couple of Kickstarters I'm currently backing have been released to Essen and other people have been able to buy them, and us Kickstarter backers haven't got copies yet.
I think that's like the biggest sin in Kickstarter.
I agree. It's just one of the most annoying things. Is that as people who are basically funding the project, I personally think that you should get first dibs.
You should get a reward for doing it that you shouldn't be able to get at retail, I think, personally.
Well, this is, we can come back to Rory Summers' question on that, actually, John. And it is linked. He asks, what do you consider a more important offer? Kickstarter exclusives, stuff you don't get in the shops, or a significant reduction in price against RRP?
At least
They
one
both
of
have
those
their
two.
merit. Agreed, yeah, one or the other. I mean, personally, I'm all about the exclusives because I'm a, rub it in your face kind of person because I'm a knob. Look what I've got, smarm.
Just don't combine those two things.
See, I'm the opposite way. I'm more.
You prefer the price reduction?
I'm more after price reduction because unless if it's bling, it's kind of I can give or take the bling usually. And if it's like Kickstarter exclusive characters or missions or scenarios or something like that, I've tend to find in the past they don't tend to be that good. You don't actually get much money's worth out of them. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it depends on what the exclusives are.
Yeah,
because I've mentioned Cavern Tavern and Ave Roma as really good ones I really like, and I'm really glad I backed both of them. With Ave Roma, for example, it blinged up the little workers, so instead of getting little sort of discs, you got like proper Roman pillars. Those sorts of things are quite nice touches. And they're not very expensive either. I mean, the whole thing was only about 45, 50 euros, so it was really, really good. It was only sort of, and you get little sort of the first, the player marker tokens were just little ships instead of little discs. Stuff like that isn't massively expensive, doesn't change the price. I think that sort of thing is, nice touches. But as you say, Steve, it's you get one card in the game that you don't get in the retail copy. Who cares? It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It doesn't. You probably won't even see that card in most games you play. It's stuff like that. I think I'd rather get £5 discount or something like that.
I'd add one other opportunity that would be worth doing a Kickstarter for, and that's the opportunity to get it first. Like if you knew that by backing it you got it, say, a month ahead of anyone else could actually buy it in the shops, and it's something like you look at the concept and you think, oh my god, this looks amazing. This is like Talisman 2.0 or something. Or insert your game that you actually enjoy playing here.
Well, this is the bit that was before you mention all the exclusives, John. Is that I agree with you. I think as a backer of that project, you are or should be entitled to receive it before anybody else. You funded it basically. You're one of the owners of that project.
Yeah.
And as such, you're basically an investor. There's no reason why you shouldn't get it ahead of anybody else. Whereas at the moment, there's been quite a few examples this year at Essen where people going to Essen have picked up their copy before us poor schmucks who paid for the bloody thing to be made are still waiting till they receive theirs, which I think is a bit cheeky.
We mentioned in the last podcast episode about Gloomhaven, where Gloomhaven was available at a few retailers before Kickstarter backers had got it. And see, I'm not as annoyed about it as you two guys, and I can understand what publishers need to do. Things like Gen Con, Essen, UK Games Expo.
Massive sales opportunities.
They're massive sales opportunities. And you've just Kickstarter money is not usually all the money you're going to put into a product. So for the really bigger projects, companies are going to invest their own money as well. So you want to, from a business point of view, cash is king is always a phrase, and so you want that cash flow, and cash flow you get from selling the games. And if not having a game at Essen or not having a game at Gen Con and then releasing it like 3 weeks later, you've missed that massive marketing opportunity. You've missed the opportunity for further sales and to make that game more widely known. So I kind of can't begrudge them. I mean,
I think you could queue that stuff up though. Like if you know that Essen's going to be at a particular time, and you know that your stuff, your Kickstarter's going to end at a particular time, you could time it so that those things, but I can totally see it from their point of view that if you almost don't want it to be like the Kickstarter ends there and then a month later at Essen you can get your copy because the excitement would have gone. Whereas if you can queue the two things up together, there's still this, I could actually get it at Essen, I could buy a new thing and then there's probably more sales I could imagine happening as a result of that. So I could understand why as a publisher you'd be, you would want to do it that way. I just, from an end user, as someone who's backed something and I want to be special.
Exactly. Or you sell it at Essen like people are doing, but you sell the retail copy, not the Kickstarter exclusive copy.
Which a lot of companies do, yeah.
Which is fair enough, I think.
Yeah. But I think I don't think companies are doing this on purpose. I think what's happening is delays in manufacture. I think most of these go in with good intentions and say, right, we're going to ship it to backers on 1st of October and then 25th of October's Essen.
To be fair, there are a few projects I've backed that have set out with exactly that intention. You can pay for an Essen pickup, or you can pay for it to ship to you, either a week before or whatever it is. But of course, as you say, there are delays in shipping, delays in manufacture, delays in proofing, delays in design. Oh crap, we've just discovered there's a massive problem with the rules, or whatever it is. And then, of course, a month in a project like that is nothing. It's not much of a buffer at all.
No, and I've heard of companies where the games they've been selling at Essen or Gen Con are quite literally the first 200 off the production line.
Sure.
And they've shipped it on air freight. Essen starts on Thursday morning. It landed in Germany Wednesday afternoon. Kind of thing.
Sure, yeah. And some poor transit van drivers driving along with 200 copies of Scythe to get to Essen just in time. Absolutely. Didn't Board and Dice do that? They basically turned was it last year where they basically just got literally a van full of, was it either Super Hot or the Beer Empire, whichever one it was, possibly Multi-Universe and one of those three, and they just literally had a transit van full of these bloody things, literally driving it to whichever convention it was because they'd picked them up from the warehouse that morning. It's that tight.
Pretty exciting thing to do as a publisher.
Yeah, it is. It must be. The looks on their faces was superb. They took a few pictures of it. It looked fantastic. Just to see a project come to life. Oh my God, this is ours. Holy shit, we've got to get, halfway across the country in an hour and a half. Andy, you're driving.
Yeah.
I don't mind it coming out earlier. What does wind me up is if when you find it at retail, Gloomhaven is Gloom of Kilforth is an example of this, is when it was at retail for cheaper than what you backed it for at Kickstarter for the same game. Yes.
Now, we had that with Ominos as well.
Yeah. Now, again, that's retailers. It wasn't being sold for that price at the Gloom of Kilforth stand at Expo. It was other retailers selling it for 45 quid when I'd paid 55 quid.
Yeah. Now, I mean, we've talked about RRP in the past. I don't think we've done it in a podcast officially, but you and I've certainly discussed with. Actually, no, I think we have. People selling RRP and whinging that the price is too much. And I mean, we talked about Terraforming Mars at 63 quid. It most certainly is not worth it. But if you can pick it up for 45, it's not RRP, and you've got a bargain. It's up to the shop to discount it. If they want to discount something, that's up to them. But of course, it does have the knock-on effect that if you've paid for something, as you've said, for 10, 20 quid more at Kickstarter, you can't help but feel a bit gypped.
Yeah, that's fair enough.
Let's pick another question from the list, shall we? So we talked about the exclusives and Rory's question about exclusive versus reduction in price. Alberto asks, there is a high number of launches, some with fancy productions, with videos, minis, etc., that catch the eye, but how do you check if there's enough game in them? On the other hand, how do you make sure you don't miss a hidden gem with a brilliant game but not great marketing?
It's a bloody good question.
With difficulty.
Although, I mean, I was obviously been involved in this production process, having done the voiceover for one of these things.
Yeah, and what happened to that Kickstarter, Mr. Lewis?
It's apparently about to have its third relaunch.
So generally speaking, if it's voiced by Andy Lewis, then there's a good chance it's going to be a stinker.
Based on the current track record, I can't argue with the facts. However, I don't like the correlation. Because actually, Mr. Grogan, in fact, this is we missed him out on the last podcast. Mr. Grogan recommended me to somebody else for a voiceover.
Yeah, there you go.
And they even got in touch.
Well, now that you've got a pop filter, it might not be so bad.
Indeed, yeah.
Ow, my ears.
Yes. But it's a good question. I mean, I've mentioned Ave Roma again. I have to admit, I think it's probably still one of my favourite Kickstarters that I've backed. It's one of my first, but certainly one of my favourites. That I think I almost stumbled upon it more than anything else because it wasn't big in the eyes. It hadn't been heavily marketed. It's from a little-known company called A Games. I think they're still quite little known, although I have backed Sakura, which is their next production.
So have I.
Yeah, you see, and it looks really cool.
Which one's Sakura?
And I've backed it. It's a Japanese one, and I can't remember.
You'll find out soon, John, because 2 of us have backed it, so
Exactly.
you know that you'll play it with one of us.
Yep.
Yeah.
But it looks a lot simpler now, Roma. But I've backed it for 2 reasons. One, it looked quite nice, and 2, games have, in my eyes, cemented themselves as a good quality Kickstarter company because of this. But when I first saw Ave Roma, it wasn't being pushed, it wasn't being massively marketed. It didn't make a huge amount of money on it. It was only 200 odd grand. They wanted 50 to start it, something like that. It wasn't huge. How do you make sure you don't miss something? I don't know, unless you troll Kickstarter all day.
Andy.
No, I think you're right, because there are games you look at. I think you've got to make a judgment call yourself and kind of go, well, is that what I'm after? Is that the game? Is that game for me just based on what you see? But it is difficult. I think the fact that I've said I've backed a couple of stinkers, and you're suggesting you might have as well, Andy, suggest that it's not an easy decision to make based on what is effectively just artwork.
Speaking of stinkers, we have both yet to play Ether Wars, haven't we? And neither of us is looking forward to that experience. Let's be honest.
We don't know if it's going to be a stinker, but you're right.
Yeah, no, there's no proof that it is, but the fact that we both have trepidation, we've both independently arrived at that conclusion, doesn't bode well.
No.
Personally, I think you need to look at like the different aspects of what you enjoy in a game and the levels that the Kickstarter gives you. So like if it meets like a reasonable level of it's got some minis and they look all right, or it's got some minis and they look incredible, you need to look at how many boxes it's ticking for you in terms of a game that you're going to enjoy, I think.
Bang for buck, basically.
I've got to admit, although I don't tend to watch many gameplay videos, I will try and find some indication that they're at least showing the gameplay.
Yeah, if I can't see any mechanics about how you play the game, I won't back the game. That's my golden rule. If it just looks like lots of beautiful miniatures, well, I could go out and buy lots of beautiful miniatures from anywhere.
Simon, sorry.
Got a nasty cough there, Andy, yeah.
I do, yeah.
Need some Horlicks.
I do. Hey, don't mock the Horlicks, man. It's great stuff.
Still sounds like a euphemism for something to me, but anyway.
But everything sounds like a euphemism to you.
Guilty as charged.
That's true. Especially if it comes out of my mouth.
But
you see what I did there. But it's a bloody good. We've mentioned Simon. There was a lot of speculation around Rising Sun and The Godfather that it's just minis on a board. Although apparently Rising Sun's quite good. But
yes. Well, see, I've backed Rising Sun, so I'm waiting impatiently for that one to arrive. And yeah, the initial reviews of that, because several copies of that were available at Gen Con.
Oh, right, there you go.
But only that's a bit of a weird one because there was about 10 copies, I think, and that's about it. What I find quite interesting about Rising Sun is somebody went to Gen Con, played it, and made a travel version.
Hey?
Right.
Therefore showing, and all the little units were tokens. Therefore proving that you do not need miniatures to play that game at all.
Yeah, it's just bling, isn't it?
Yeah.
But then if they can prove that you can do that and the travel game is just as much fun, albeit slightly less pretty, I think that shows that you're really onto a really good game.
I suppose. Or that it's unnecessarily expensive and Simon are taking the piss.
Yeah.
But that is Simon's business model. Simon is a company which started out doing Kickstarter. I mean, you mentioned Godfather. Godfather didn't come through Kickstarter. That was just a retail release.
True, it was, yes.
So when Simon started, that was just like Jamie Stegmaier and Stonemaier Games, that was their business model. They started via Kickstarter. Yeah.
Charterstone's not Kickstarter. That's his first non-Kickstarter game.
That's his first. No, Between Two Cities, I don't think went to Kickstarter.
True, but that wasn't him designing it.
No, but it's still a Stonemaier game, isn't it?
Stonemaier,
yeah,
you're right.
But he has said he's not going to do Kickstarter anymore.
No, I suspect it's because he's probably garnered enough relationship and trust from the industry that he's got, and presumably he's got a big pile of cash because of people buying his games. He can afford to do so.
But I think there were some issues with the Scythe as well. It's on his blog. I keep meaning to read it. There's one of his blog entries where he explains exactly why he's not doing Kickstarter again, having basically quite literally written the book on how to do board game Kickstarters.
Yeah.
He's now leaving it behind.
Oh, okay. Interesting. Fair enough. One thing I have back with lots and lots of minis is Lords of Hellas. And there is a big suspicion that that's lots of minis on a map with bugger all game, but we shall see.
See, now I've got more confidence in that one because of the designer.
Yeah, me too, because of Awakened Realms, so...
Yeah, well, no, not Awakened Realms, actually the designer of the game itself, because this is the same chap who designed In Between, which me and John played a couple of weeks back.
Yeah, okay.
Ooh. Okay.
I really like that game.
There we go.
Yeah, which is basically Stranger Things, the card game.
Wicked.
But again, that's one where, yes, it's got some nice artwork, but the really good stuff is actually the mechanics in the game and the way it sort of twos and fro's between you. Like, it's the interactions that makes it fun.
That's why I think Lords of Hellas, I'm confident that that's going to be a good game.
Yeah.
That'd be right.
The other one that Andy's backed that I'm not as confident with is the other miniatures packed game you've backed.
Oh, piss off. That'll be amazing.
Is it a Stonemaier?
I have a lot of faith in that. It is not a Stonemaier game, no.
It's got
It
miniatures
is
in
by
it, so probably not.
Dimension Games. It has a lot of miniatures. 163 miniatures to be exact.
Jesus.
Plus any of the extra ones I've bought. No, this is Deep Madness. This is like, underwater Cthulhu, basically.
Yeah. The premise sounds good.
It'll be brilliant.
163 miniatures, though. That suggests to me that they're compensating for something.
No, it's because I've bought quite a few expansions.
Is this why you didn't have any food last week?
I backed this before Christmas last year. That's why nobody got any Christmas presents last year.
You've just actually reminded me of a thing which I'm going to admit annoys me about Kickstarter, but I'm going to see what your opinion is first. Deep Madness is a perfect example of this, and Simon's Rising Sun and most of other Simon's games are also perfect examples. A lot of games come out on Kickstarter now, and the game will come out on Kickstarter, so this is a game that has never been released yet, and it will be released with expansions. Now, some of these expansions may be add-ons, and some of them may be stretch goals. Like, for instance, Dark Souls is a good example. There's 2 big expansions for that, one of which was a stretch goal, the other was an add-on. Now, what are your thoughts about games which effectively release with an expansion right out the door? And this is a very common thing on Kickstarter because things like Fantasy Flight Games, when they release a game, won't release another expansion for, say, 6 to 12 months. Whereas Kickstarter comes out the gate with 4 or 5 expansions.
It goes back to that question you mentioned before. Like, if that's your reward for doing the Kickstarter is that you get a bunch of expansions, well, that seems like. But
they're not
exclusive.
They're not necessarily exclusive expansions.
Yeah,
that's the thing.
These are almost always not exclusive because they're expansions, so they are.
Yeah.
But if you get them for for basically the price of the base game, for example.
Yeah, that's fair, because, generally speaking, you will get the exclusives cheaper than you would in the shop. They're much, much less than RRP. This War of Mine came out with a bunch of expansions. There's like 4 expansions in the Kickstarter version of This War of Mine, and they were included in just like the base cost, which I think is a really nice way of doing it. So you get a massive discount, essentially, on RRP, I suppose, is one way of looking at it.
A stretch goal view of that. Effectively.
Yes, basically, yes.
Yeah.
But it does. It starts. Well, we can start to answer a bunch of questions with this. Is that Az has asked quite a lot of questions, actually, to be fair. But has Kickstarter massively changed the way we, board games are bought and sold? Yes. It comes back to do you buy an expansion straight away? I'll answer your question in a minute, Steve. I am getting there, I assure you. But shut up. I am answering the question. I'm also answering other people's questions. But it's a fair question because you want to play the base game before you expand it. Obviously, of course you do. But at the same time, me being a completionist, it feeds me something fierce. All of the expansions right now. And you get a lot of money. But the thing is, in doing that, you're basically I suppose, artificially inflating the price of the game. Because whilst you could just resist and go, yeah, I'll only buy the base copy, no one does that. Nobody does that. Nobody. So
that's why these cool mini or not Kickstarters are so popular, because people do get the add-on expansions.
Because you have the all-important fear of missing out. And I genuinely think that has actually started to become a legitimate marketing strategy.
I'm going to say, we'll come back a little bit on, we'll come back to fear of missing out a bit more in a minute.
Yeah.
John, what did you want to say?
Nothing important.
Okay. What I was wondering...
It's gone.
We'll come on to fear of missing out in a minute, because I wanted to talk about this idea of the base game, and it does answer Az's question about how things have changed. There's a story about how Dominion, the card game, was made. And when Dominion was designed, all the expansions were designed at the same time.
Oh, really?
And with the base game. And what happened was the publisher and designer then carved it apart and kind of broke it. I think it's 5 expansions originally for Dominion, so they just carved it into 6 sets. And then said, right, this is basically, if it's successful, we'll then make another Kickstarter, sorry. If it's successful, we'll then do another expansion. If that sells well, we'll do another expansion, and so on. And what they did is then, that was over like 4 years, I think, those expansions were kind of released.
Mm-hmm.
Now, to me, that shows, well, there's a bit of a business kind of risk aversion there, where the company's going, well, we won't release an expansion unless we know there's enough sale of the product. But it also means that a release of an expansion will mean that the original game will sell more, providing it's a good enough game, because it comes back into people's mind's eye. You know, it's back on everyone's radar. Oh, the expansion for Dominion's coming out. Oh, really? I quite like the idea of Dominion. I need to give that a go. I think I'll go out and buy the base game.
Yep.
What worries me about this Kickstarter attitude of, and Deep Madness did this, Dark Souls did this, all the cool mini or not games did this, is they released the game with the expansions and it's at the gate and off you go. And I'm really concerned that then the company has no interest in that game after the Kickstarter.
Yeah, they've kind of blown their load in one go.
They've said, here's the entire game, here's the Kickstarter, it's over and done with, we will never revisit that game again. Now, there's some aspects you might go, well, that's not a problem, I've now got everything I need.
Yeah.
But we all know that rule books require erratas and reprints and things like that. And there's always a worry that a company's just going to wash their hands of a game and go, well, no, we've delivered all the Kickstarter to all the backers now. It's all done. We're going to move now on to the next project.
Yeah.
But
then I guess conversely, you could buy the base game or something and then think, I wish there was some more expansions to this. But because they didn't Kickstarter it with all sorts of expansions to come, that's it. They made the base game and they could stop there.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, I don't disagree with this, actually. I think it's a fair point, Steve. But from what I've seen, the expansions to a lot of Kickstarters are still available in the shops. So there must be some level of support from the company in order to either print them or support them in order to get them sold. I can see your point.
In most cases we've seen, yeah.
It's a valid point of view.
I'm going to make the analogy a couple of times. It reminds me a little bit of the whole day one DLC for video games.
Oh my God.
Yeah,
I always hated
really
DLC.
Yeah, it's the same principle. You're right.
It's the same principle. And I'm actually going to say the whole Kickstarter, everything that everyone is lapping up on Kickstarter now is the things that people hate video games for.
Yeah, no, I can't disagree with that.
People are buying board games on Kickstarter without playing the game first or seeing any reviews. And they're lapping it up because it's got the hype. And people are spending... And, you pre-ordered a video game, it was 40 to 60 quid, depending on what you got, and it was 100 quid for the special edition with the
season pass and all this sort of shit, yeah.
Well, no, I'm talking about the special edition with the tin and the bust of Ezio that you can put on your bookshelf.
I was about to say, I've got the Assassin's Creed tin.
What a shock.
I am part of the problem.
You are the problem, Andy.
Actually, the reason I did is because it was the same price as the normal edition on Amazon. I thought, well, bollocks to it. I'll get the pretty tin.
That was fair enough.
That's fair enough. But some of these ones, like the special editions that come with like models and replica guns, or God, what was there was a Call of Duty one that came with actual night vision goggles.
What?
So it was like £400 or something like that. But it's like that special editions were all like 100 quid, 400 quid. And my worry is the Kickstarter with all the expansions and the bling updates, it's the same kind of mentality.
And the board cube and...
Yeah, exactly. The board cube's a
To be
perfect
fair,
example.
that does have a lot in it, but it's, possibly unnecessary.
It's when you look at the Kickstarter and the bottom, like the last little tier that you can add is like a chest that's like, 2 meters long by... And you're like, it's like $1,000 or whatever. And you just think, really? Did someone actually... I mean, someone's backed it, so clearly someone did care enough to do it, but you just think...
That's the designer's mum.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, as you say, I've backed Deep Madness and Lords of Hellas. They're two prime examples. But I could have just gone for the base copy of Deep Madness, for example, which was only, 60 quid? Something like that. It wasn't a huge amount of money. No, it was $100. $100.
You've got a problem when you start saying it's only 60 quid for this board game.
Well, things most board games cost 40 to 50 quid these days, so 60 quid's not a massive stress.
Yeah, modern days, you say only 60 quid. That's the going rate of a board game at the moment.
It really is.
Between 40 and 60, I would say, depending which game you're going for. But if you say it's only 60 quid, that suggests that's like your lower limit.
Well, considering you look at something like Mansions of Madness, the RRP on that's £94.
Yeah, but I bought it recently for 63 or something.
Yeah, but that's we always have to quote RRP, otherwise,
I'm not disagreeing with that. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
For me, if I spend more than 60 quid on a game, it has to be something pretty special.
Yeah, that's fair enough. But Deep Madness was, I think it's $100, something like that, for its base game. I've spent considerably more than that. And
by an order of magnitude?
No. There was a factor involved. But I've also included 2 expansions. So we're basically, answering Steve's question here. A couple of add-ons and all sort of bits and bobs. Obviously there's quite a considerable amount of money for just shipping this bastard because it's huge. But I've done that because I'm a completionist, not because I particularly need these things.
Sounds like a religion.
Maybe it is.
Well, if you just bleep out, if I just change completionist to junkie, I think the entire concept would just.
But you know what?
Well.
I've just finished my Android Universe set as well, because I've just received Android Infiltration finally for less than Steve paid, I might add. So now I've got all 5 games from that universe, which I have to say I'm quite proud of.
Oh, come on, Kickstarter. I'm good for it. I'm good for it. I'll pay you next week.
Daddy needs his sugar. Come on, get me a vein. But do I need to do that? No, because those expansions will be available in the shops. But again, they're going to be considerably more for the expansion RRP than they are for the Kickstarter. So in a way, I'm actually saving money.
Sure you are.
That's junkie talk.
It is. I'm going to keep telling myself that.
So on that very matter, I want to go back to the fear of missing out then, because that's the completionist, air quotes.
It is, yes.
Is another way of saying I've got to buy it now. If I have to buy it now. You look at Kickstarter and you see those expansions and you say to yourself, "Oh, this should be coming out in retail," but will they? Are these going to come out in retail? And some Kickstarters in the past have been that kind of, well, there's no guarantee it's going to come out in retail. There's no guarantee I'm going to be able to buy it in the shop. And cool me nuts, Blood Rage.
Yeah.
That has come out. You can buy that in the shops now. But when that first came out, that was like rocking horse muck to go and find. And it was about 5 copies got put into UK retail. Gloomhaven, massive Kickstarter, went to retail. The retail copies of that sold out instantly.
Yeah.
So there is this thing of, well, if I don't back it now, will I be able to buy it? And we call it FOMO, or the fear of missing out. And I think some companies are now starting to use that as an actual marketing strategy.
Monolith! Sorry.
It's a nasty cough you've got there, Andy.
It is. I should get it looked at.
Yeah.
Well, the reason I say Monolith is because they are, if you don't know, are making the Batman miniatures game based on the Conan system that Steve and I played at Expo this year. I have to say, it is quite a good game, to be fair, but it is not going to be released in the shops at all. It is a Kickstarter exclusive release.
Now, it's been hinted that it might be available to buy from them, as in direct, but it's not going to go. But it's not going to go to a distributor.
Like Mechs versus Minions.
Yes. Now, one other game which is even more of a FOMO problem is Seventh Continent from Serious Pulp, because they have said also that it's not going to retail, and have also strongly suggested this game will not be available to buy from them either.
Okay.
Hence why it made $7 million on the Kickstarter that just ended.
Well played, my friends. Well played.
I have to say, it looks kind of boring, but anyway.
And you're saying that.
I am. I'm very choosy on my Kickstarters, Mr. Cage, believe it or not.
I just mean you like things like viticulture and things which do drag on a bit. I'm just here for the controversy. I actually quite like the game.
You see? I'm not going to dignify it with an answer.
I don't understand it, but but I did enjoy randomly coming second.
You won, didn't you?
No, I came second.
No, Luke did.
Luke won.
Drip fed
cool.
some cheese or something like that.
Oh, that's right. Yes. Anyway,
So I will say this. I don't want to be ranty, but actually the Seventh Continent one is the one that annoyed me the most because it wasn't a small purchase either. It wasn't a case of, 50 quid off you go. You could actually, as you said, buy just the base game for about 50 quid. Or you could buy the version which was on Kickstarter previously, because this was a second printing, which was about 100 quid.
Mm.
Or you could buy the new version with all the Kickstarter exclusives in the last one, and the new expansions, which came to about 180 quid.
Oh!
And then a whole plethora of add-ons got announced.
Oh yes, I remember you complaining to me on Messenger. Yeah, Andy, this is getting silly now. I said, well, yeah, you're backing it.
And I didn't.
You didn't?
I didn't even back it and pull out again. I did not back Seventh Continent because I actually got angry with this.
Okay.
Every time I went and looked at the Kickstarter page, there was another add-on added, and each one was only like another $10.
Oh, another add-on that you had to pay for. Yeah, right, okay.
Add-ons are always paid for.
Rather than unlocked, sorry, yeah.
Yeah.
So the stretch goals are unlocks, whereas the add-ons are, we want your money. And you're going to pay us. Yep, yes I am.
And $7 million says that
and again.
Everyone does, yes.
Well played. Yeah.
I was on the fence about Seventh Continent, but when this attitude of, again, this mixture of fear of missing out and constantly adding more add-ons, I just went to the point, well, I'm either going to have to buy a small subset of this and take the risk that I'm never going to be able to expand it if I like it, or I'm going to have to spend several £100 and then there's the risk that I'm not going to like it. And in the end, I decided, no.
Not worth the risk.
I think you've been rather sensible, Mr. Tudor.
Not often.
No. More often than me. Because Lords of Hellas was the same. Every bloody 5 minutes there was a new add-on, or we've just decided to expand this and add in another miniature, and here's, the Minotaur or whatever the hell it is. And all of a sudden it's like, and I thought, well, you start adding up all, you're like, well, I'll increase my pledge for this much, and then this much. And basically I was updating my pledge every day. Although this is taking the piss. And at the end of it, they just decided, it's almost like they'd thought about it, They just decided at the end of it, you can go all in for, this sort of super turbo amount of money. And I thought, well, it saves me a £5. Yeah, why not?
Let's face it, I'm going to have to buy all of this stuff so that I can complete the set. So I might as well spend another £5 on top of the £5,000 I spent.
If you're spending that amount of money, why the hell not?
And I think Batman is going to have exactly that. And I'm torn on Batman because I've played Batman and I know I like it.
Yeah, me too. We still need to play Conan. You haven't played Conan yet, have you?
I'd like to play that.
Played Conan yet.
It's a good system. And Batman was really cool, especially because I won. Basically, shot Steve's Catwoman in the face with a shotgun. She was out of the game for basically just lying on her ass for most of the game. And then someone tried to punch Bane, and he got pissed off and beat the crap out of them. It's like, yeah, I'm going to win this, boys. Out. On the plus side, we did get to see King's Will out of it. Because the person who I kept accusing as Robin, who got really annoyed, it's not Robin, it's Red Hood. Whatever, Robin. Red Hood! Whatever. You're dead. He did ask us to review a game for him, so it's not all bad. But yeah, I mean, Batman was annoyingly good, but it does strike me that it is going to be, I think, the thick end of 200 quid at least.
Oh, I think 300 myself.
Yes.
Conan all in was about 250, I think. So I think it's going to be like 300.
Bloody hell. Yeah, I don't think I will.
I can't see how you can justify 300 quid on a board game, personally.
You can't at all. Just don't think
You
about
can't. It doesn't stop us.
No.
Gotta spend it.
Yep. It is crazy.
Mm.
Do you know what's funny? I was talking to a colleague of ours the other day, a few weeks ago, about that. And I said, it's funny how you spend money. Because, like, you look at something in the shop, you go, Jesus, 20 quid for that? That's ridiculous. 70 quid for a board game? Nah, it's fine. How does that work?
We talk about video games. I still buy quite a lot of video games, but I always buy them when they're like 18 months old.
Yes.
Because I wait until they're like less than 20 quid. It also means that I can wait until I know exactly what were the good games. You know, you wait till the end of the year list comes out. You know, best games of 2017 list comes out. Well, that's what I add to my wish list.
Yes.
But I look at a video game and go I know it's going to be probably going to be rubbish, but I'm looking at Battlefront 2 coming out soon. I'm thinking, it's about 50 quid that. But at the same time, I'm like, ooh, Fallout game's coming from FFG soon. That's going to be about 80 quid. Yeah, I'll have that.
Exactly. You see? It's funny how you put value on stuff,
But
isn't
you're
it?
probably balancing out how much you expect to play it. Like the video game, if you played it a few times, didn't really like it, and it was only 50 quid or something, only. You could probably sell it easier as well. That's the other thing. Like video games don't really age unless you scratch the disc, in which case, well, you can't really sell it, can you?
No.
Yeah, but I'd say video game value depreciates ridiculously quickly, though.
Yeah, you're probably right.
It does. It does on the PC.
Yeah, if I bought Battlefront 2 before Christmas at 50 quid and I took it to CEX after Christmas, I reckon I'd lose 25 quid on it.
Yeah.
Easily.
I reckon I'd lose 50% in like 3 months. Whereas if I bought Fallout at 50, say that Fallout is 50 quid, I bought Fallout for 50 quid in November and I don't like it after Christmas. January, I can probably sell it for 45.
Yeah. They
Yeah,
do hold the
okay.
value better. It's true.
So it's actually a better argument the other way around, I think.
Well, I stand corrected.
So, back to a few more questions. Let's finish off the one Az asked. So, Az asked a couple of questions. We're all kind of intrinsically linked. So, he asked, has Kickstarter changed the way games are sold and produced forever? And he says, it has, by the way.
Yeah, I think the fact that half our discussion this evening has been about that would agree.
Yeah, it has, yeah.
He also says, what will be the long-term effects of this? Which also goes into a question we had off Justin Morgan Davis, which was, is the Kickstarter bubble likely to burst sometime soon?
And, I say one of the prompts I've added, which is a genuine question, really, is that has this resulted in a steadily rising price of games?
Yes, because the stretch goal mentality has definitely had an effect. This idea that, you know, the more people back it, which means the more bling that game gets added. And this whole thing we've just said about exclusives and add-ons and you know, we just talked about £200 to £300 on a game.
It's that snowball, isn't it? Once it starts rolling, if you can then add an unlock and an unlock and an unlock, and people think, well, there's going to be a load more stuff on this. I can justify paying 40 quid for this game or 60 quid or whatever it is, and I know that there's going to be other stuff down the line. You're like, okay, well, I really like the concept, and I'm going to get a load of extra stuff if I just hold on in there. All right, then.
Yeah.
Exactly. And all of a sudden, you've spent 200 quid. For example, hypothetically speaking,
And those stretch goals are all increasing the quality. They're increasing the card stock, adding extra miniatures, improving the miniature quality. And what's happened is retail games have had to up their game to meet that. I mean, you only have to look at games that released 5 years ago, before Kickstarter really became big. The game quality of the components of the top companies like FFG were always going to be top. But the middle to lower tier companies were obviously nowhere near as higher quality. And they've all had to kind of, try to keep up with Kickstarter.
Yeah. Well, this is the thing. I mean, you could look at this as a positive, oddly. That, you're paying more for the game, but the component quality is so much better these days than it used to be. Of course, the flip side is, does it need to be? Because as you've just referred to, someone's come out, Steve, and made a travel version, basically of Rising Sun, proving John's point that, well, you don't need the miniatures.
No, that's...
So you've just, you're saving £60 or £100 on production copy on value that just doesn't need to be there.
So I wasn't saying that you don't need the miniatures. I was saying if you've got a good game, it's good because of the core mechanics. The pretty miniatures, the nice artwork, and all that sort of stuff adds to it. But you don't need that extra stuff to still enjoy the game. Whereas if you've just just got pretty artwork, nice miniatures, and it costs you £100, but the game is actually boring or it's fundamentally flawed, then you're going to play it once, and the rest of the time it's going to sit on a shelf looking very pretty, but it's an ornament, not a board game.
But the point is that, assuming it is good mechanics, you've got a good game underneath all the bling, you don't need that bling for it to be a good game. Ergo, you're adding to the production cost and therefore the overall price of the game, unless you give your Kickstarter people the choice between counters or miniatures, which is almost unheard of. I think it's happened once and it was a catastrophic failure.
No, Farsight did it.
Did they? Well, there you go. Oh, no, Gloomhaven did it as well, didn't they? They offered standees or miniatures, but it's very rare. It doesn't happen very often. And Farsight did it. You're right. Yeah.
Because I didn't buy the miniatures.
Yeah, because it was purely bling. It's not necessary. Yeah. And this is the thing. Very few of these games, especially the CMON games, don't give you that choice. So they're basically saying you're paying £100 for these miniatures, whether you like it or not, even if you don't need them. And that's the thing. Yeah, you get really, really nice component quality for it, but you're also basically increasing the overall price of games, driving the price up, and raising the bar, admittedly, potentially unnecessarily. Somebody who said, oh, actually, John said, I don't want to pay more than £60 for a game without a really good reason. It's a perfectly valid point. It's a perfectly reasonable stance to take because not everyone has a load of money to burn. They'll miss out on paying £100, £200 for some of these games when in reality, they don't really need to. You could just get away with standees or counters or whatever it is and have exactly the same experience.
So what are the long-term effects? I mean, Az has actually asked quite a complicated question as well regarding some other aspects, but I'll try and touch on things as we naturally approach them. But he's asked, what do you think the long-term effects of Kickstarter is? And as I said, Justin Morgan Davis has asked, is it going to be a bubble?
I think, as you said, the fact that it's raising the bar and enabling the bar to be raised of companies who are like in the middle and lower tiers of the amount of stuff that they can produce. That seems like a good thing to me. If it means that you can put a game out there where you wouldn't have had enough capital to do that, that's cool. But if it means that all board games are now £60 plus, for one thing, it means I'm going to be way more picky about what board games I buy.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. Yeah.
You're much less likely to take a chance if it's a significant chunk above what you think is reasonable for a game that you'll play at least once, but possibly no more than once. If you're taking a chance on it, you're not going to spend that kind of money.
That's true. And therefore it becomes prohibitive for the smaller companies. People like CMON, they've got a name for themselves now because they've done so many games, they've made quite a lot of money and so on and so forth, so they can probably afford to take slightly more of a risk. Whether they do or not is up to them. But the really smaller companies who are just starting out and kind of using Kickstarter, I suppose, for its intended purpose, And I suppose this kind of touches on Mark Cook's question of, do games need to be fully formed, and is it harder to use Kickstarter for its intended purpose?
So briefly, Mark Cook's question was, has Kickstarter just become a pre-order tool, and do you think it's harder to use it for its intended purpose?
Yeah, I'd say.
Yes.
And also he said, do games need to be in a fully formed and designed state before launching?
Certainly seems to be the case, because the bar is getting raised, the price is going up. It's becoming, I say, more prohibitive, really, for the really small companies with a fledgling idea. You turn up, as you said, Steve, you've alluded to it once or twice before, that, gone are the days of turning up with, a few pencil sketches and an idea. Hey guys, give me $5,000 to try and produce this game into something playable. Whereas now, Monsterland's perfect example, we touched on it a couple of podcasts ago. It's basically a finished product. And this was the prototype. This was the pre-production copy. Jesus, what's the final copy going to look like? Now that I've backed it.
Certainly the production standards of an awful lot of these board games nowadays are so high that, when you look back to sorts of things that like some of the small producers might put out that we've been sent as, testers, as samples that we can play the core mechanics of, if you put that on a Kickstarter compared to some of the other stuff that's out there, it's definitely like, it's a margin away from that stuff.
It is. It really is.
Well, it's that thing we talked about. You're being more picky with your games because, as we said, games are becoming more expensive. So you're being more picky with what you're going to back. And there's a lot more games available, both Kickstarter and non-Kickstarter, which means, again, you're going to be pickier. So, as you said, you look at a game which is just a pencil sketch and some concepts, you're going to kind of go, well, why should I give them money when they haven't done the core work? Well, you go on like Simon's and you find, it's practically all the miniatures are modelled, the prototypes are there, the rule book's there. It's like, well, you've got a finished game. The risk, the amount of risk has been significantly reduced because you can see they've done investment of money by paying artists and graphic designers, and investment of time by producing rule books and prototypes and play testing and that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's true. Because how many? It does come to it touches back on the question, Alberto's question, how do you pick out a good game and a bad game from all of the marketing and stuff? That how many games do you look at Kickstarter now that aren't close to being finished or like can demonstrate that they're really far down that line? Almost none.
Next
You
to
look
none.
at what exactly. We are part of the problem, I suppose, that we're not helping the people who are trying to use Kickstarter for its intended purpose. We're looking at, I want, as you say, low risk stuff. I want to be able to invest in a game. Okay, even Dream Wars, maybe Bobbins, and it looks lovely and it looks really great as a Kickstarter. But you're looking ideally to reduce your risk, as you rightly say. Even as a customer, the company is using Kickstarter as a risk reduction process because they want to know the orders, they want to know the quantities. Somebody else is basically paying for the investment, i.e., the poor schmucks at the end of it. But at the same time, we want to see low risk projects. We want to see them succeed on time to spec, with a few freebies chucked in. I don't know, it's a horrible balancing act. It's a big runaway process at the moment. It really is. And as Justin says, it can't last forever. It's not sustainable. Because it's going to get to the point where, the minimum entry level for a Kickstarter project is going to be like £400. No one is going to buy that. Nobody. Well, all right, some people will, but
Andy.
The vast majority of people. No, seriously, even I back out at that point. It's
really?
like seriously, most of the Kickstarters I back are £60 or less.
What if it came with a cube?
I haven't backed the role playing game. That was Paul. I might cover it in a bit of drool when I see it, but that's a significant amount of money. Okay, I have backed two what I would call high value Kickstarters, i.e. more than £150. Two. But I'm not trying to make a habit of it because I can't afford it more than anything else. I agree with you, John. Anything more than £60, and I think the three of us have talked about this a long time ago, is like, we are fortunately to the point where our time is more valuable than our money, if that makes sense. We have that luxury in our lives that we've got jobs, we've got careers, we've got a bit of play money that we can say actually £50, it's not going to break the bank. I can afford to buy a game. But you get to the point where you think 60 quid, 70 quid, you start to think about it. You think, actually, that's quite expensive. And even, we think, do I really want to pay that much money for a game? Do I really want to invest? But with Kickstarter, it's getting to the point where £100 these days on Kickstarter is kind of entry level.
Mm.
And that's a lot of money even for us, even for the vast majority of people. That's a lot of money.
Do you think that's just because when you say 100 quid is entry level, that's just because that is what you tend to look at? Like, is that your own judgment, or do you reckon that is across the board? Like, is it just that you got to the point where if it's not 100 quid, I probably won't even look at it?
It's a fair question.
Whereas actually, there might be a few gems down there. You just, mentally you've thought, well, the 100 quid mark, that's where I know I'm going to get an amazing game. It's either going to be...
No, I think it actually comes back to the question about how do you make sure you're not missing something? Because the ones that are 100 quid seem to be the ones that have got the big marketing push behind them to begin with. So your Seventh Continent, your Gloomhaven, your Thunderstone Quest Kickstarter.
City of Kings.
They've got a big marketing push behind them. They're a big deluxeified game. And I've got to admit, there's been a few games I've looked at on Kickstarter in the last few months that have been a lot less than that, about 40 quid. And I admit that I've not backed them because there's no hype behind them. There's no one else is talking about them. There was a fascinating one there was a Viking game, which you made the map out of like sections of a clock, like slices of a pie. So you had a completely different Viking map every time. It looked like fjords. And I didn't back it in the end. It looked the board looked really cool, but I didn't back it because there wasn't any reviews or anything which gave me any indication that the game was actually good, other than this map concept. There was one a couple of weeks back which was a Dwarf Forge game, of which I realised there was 6 Dwarf Forge games on Kickstarter at the same time. But again, I stumbled across that. It was about 40 quid, but I couldn't find anything like a review, or no one else was talking about it that made me think, well, is it worth looking at? Whereas, City of Kings, we all played that, so we had a good idea. Yeah. Simon has been, a Simon Kickstarter is about to go because they've been pushing it for like the last 3 months.
Yeah.
The Thunderstone Quest one was pushed for months beforehand. Every year I do a preview list of what games are coming out on the website. It's one of our biggest pages on the website. And it's increasingly becoming that half of that list are games that are hitting Kickstarter that year, not games that are coming out that year. Because people are getting used to that marketing. And so, there probably are the gems which are 40 quid, but the big hyped games that everyone's excited about are 100 quid entry fee.
So that probably neatly leads on to a question from Multicraft Ventures, which is, do you have any advice about promoting kids' board games on Kickstarter?
Yep, don't do it.
I mean, I would say it's probably going to be tougher marketing a kids' game on Kickstarter, because a lot of the people who are looking on Kickstarter have that disposable income. They're looking for a bargain. They're looking for something to spend a bit more money on, potentially. But and you just touched on this, Steve, and it's something that I think is crucial. The most important thing is, if you're going to do a board game, doesn't matter if it's a kid's game or anything else, by far and away, the most important thing you can do is show what you'll do in the game. I mean, it's good to have these, pretty bits and pieces. And if it's a kid's game, you probably want some obviously fun stuff that kids would appreciate, that kids would get excited about. But by far and away, the most important thing is to show that it's a fun game for me.
I'm going to say something further than that. That's not good enough.
No, I agree. Because
too many kids' game Kickstarters try to show that it's a fun game. Again, air quotes on an audio medium. The people who are going on Kickstarter are people like us.
When I say fun game, I mean interesting, not fun as in...
Right, okay, that's different then. Because I think
party game, yeah.
I think the problem is that most of these kids' games try and make it sound like it's fun for kids. Maybe that's the way I should do it.
Okay.
It's a fun game for kids, but the people who are going on Kickstarter and spending the money are people like us, who have the disposable income, and the enthusiast, the hobby gamer, the hobbyist. So we're looking for the Rising Suns, we're looking for the Ave Romas. if we stumble across a kid game what we think we would enjoy playing as well, I think then you're going to back it.
Yeah.
I think this. I think the skies would fall and the rivers would run red with blood if that ever happened.
What do you mean?
Because we wouldn't be playing kids games.
Speak for yourself.
Yeah, we wouldn't because we haven't got kids. But
yet. But in any case, I mean, I've got lots of friends with kids, and there are times where we've had kids round, and the games that we play with the kids are things like Quirkle, because they've got great big shapes on them. We don't play the game. We make like towers with all the right colours in, or...
But there's the thing, you would never see that sort of game on Kickstarter. I mean, to be fair, Multicraft do say our campaign is at a plateau and we think it's due to the demographics of the board game users on Kickstarter. I think they're absolutely right.
Yeah.
They're hitting the wrong market.
Yeah.
That's the point. I mean, we talked about Scrooge the other day for one of the games we saw, not the other day, a few months ago, about what we saw at Expo.
Yeah.
Scrooge is a kid's game and they're trying to put it onto Kickstarter. And pretty much everyone who's seen it has gone, nah, that's going to flop. Because there is nobody on Kickstarter who is going to be interested in that sort of game. You might get the odd one, board game enthusiasts with kids. But there are much better games out there that you can play with kids that
as opposed to kids' games.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the sort of demographic that, we're looking at. I mean, Cal, you could play viticulture with kids, for goodness sake. I mean, you wouldn't be, as an enterculture, you could. You could play things like Seven Wonders or Splendor or Spice Road with kids. Hell,
Probably
I've done
depends
it.
on the age of the kids, I would say.
Of course, yes. I mean, young kids, no. But, 10, 12-year-old kids, of course you could. Easily. And they'd probably beat you at it too.
They beat me
but
at
that's
it.
the thing. But that's the sort of game that you're looking at that we would play, that we'd probably try to introduce kids to.
So
rather
maybe-
than go out and play, Quirkle or... not that there's anything wrong with Quirkle, it's a good game. But, the Scrooge, for example, I think they're aiming it at the wrong market. They should probably just release it into Woolworths or whatever the equivalent is these days, given that Woolworths went under a few years ago.
A few.
So maybe the answer then is not how you should market your board game for kids on Kickstarter. It's how you market it to the adults. You should market it as a game that you can play as a family, not a kids game. So it's a game that's really aimed higher than that. If you're gonna market a board game on Kickstarter, it needs to be aimed at the adult market, which you can play with kids. That makes sense?
I'd agree with that, yeah.
I think the last part of your statement, definitely, yeah.
Yeah. I'd also say as well, I mean, Scrooge, I think, did actually fund. It met its goal.
Okay.
Yeah. But it also was a very slick production. It also ticks all those boxes we mentioned earlier. It was practically a finished game. The artwork was done. And I've got to admit, I've not looked at Multicraft Ventures games, so I don't know what their Kickstarter is.
Was Ice Cool a Kickstarter?
No.
Okay.
No.
But that's an example of a family game that I could imagine might actually have done well on Kickstarter. It's got a bit of a novel thing to it.
I don't think it would have done.
Yeah, see, I don't know. Is it ABBA Games that made...
Remember the top of my head?
I think so. No, their marketing was really clever. They were very generous with review copies of that game. They were aiming for a much larger number of copies printed than most board games, I think. I wouldn't be surprised if they have made 10 times more games than most people print, and they were very generous with review copies, and it got to people like us who played it and talked about it on podcasts and the written reviews and YouTube. And they had a massive stand at Games Expo. And if you want to sell a kids game and you're in the UK or in Europe at least, go to the UK Games Expo.
Because there's loads of kids there. Families go to it. That's the best market for it, not Kickstarter.
Yeah.
Because
even if you are going to go to Kickstarter, go to if UK Games Expo is the first weekend in June, either launch a Kickstarter the first weekend of June or the mid-June.
Yeah, tell people at Expo, we're launching the Kickstarter in 2 weeks. Here's the leaflet, here's the information, this is the project.
Can I have your email address so I can email you when it launches?
Exactly. That would work, and I think that would be the best way because, most families, most people who play kids games as they're marketed as, with the air quotes, don't shop on Kickstarter. They shop in places like Tesco or John Lewis or Marks and Sparks or whatever the high street vendors are. They don't look at stuff like Kickstarter because it's aimed at enthusiasts and nerds like us.
Yeah, it's probably fair.
We've really just got a few more questions to kind of ask, and that's more like what has the impact been on Kickstarter on the industry in general. Going back to Az's question, because he's asked really how has it affected how board games are sold and bought? And he's also asked, are more gaming clubs and cafes existing now because of the concept of friendly local game stores? And has this been diminished through Kickstarter and online-only sales? So he's basically linking it. The short question is Kickstarter affecting the friendly local game store? And I'd ask, what do we think is the impact of that to us?
None, almost, to be honest.
Has Kickstarter affected the local game store? In your opinion?
Probably not really. I think it's probably made it, well, probably in a positive sense more than anything else, because it's made, because a lot of Kickstarter campaigns make vendor versions of their project.
That's a relatively new thing, that is.
It is.
And it's still quite rare.
I would have thought the answer is that it probably has negatively impacted it, because if the place you go and look at and get new board games is now Kickstarter, then that's one less reason to go and visit those local stores. We touched on the local stores shutting down thing a few podcasts ago and suggested that, well, I reckon they are on their way out. As pure retail stores, I think cafes where you go to play board games, I think that's going to be an up-and-coming business in the next 5 or so years. I think those are going to spread more.
I'd say up and coming now.
Yeah.
I don't think 5 or 6 years time. I'd say now.
I mean, now they are up and coming. They are going to be more widespread, significantly more widespread in 5 or so years.
Thing is, with the local game store, you have the now factor, which we've also covered. You know, you go along, you play Magic, or you go along with your mates and play a game or whatever. Oh, look, they've got a copy of whatever the hell it is in the stock right now. You don't have that on Kickstarter. You know, you can go along and back something on Kickstarter, but as we all know, it's, 12 to 18 months before you actually get it through the post. And obviously you go to a local game shop, it's on the shelf. It might cost you £5 more, but you know what? Impatience is a virtue. So I don't think it has I don't really think it has had an effect. I can see the point, you're going to go back something on Kickstarter and maybe the local game shop won't make a sale. But I don't think it will. I don't think that really has an effect. It might have an 18-month delay.
Yeah, it's the argument that everyone's got a finite amount of money. So if you've got, say, a budget of £200 a month to spend on board games and you've just backed the Conan Batman Kickstarter, you're not going to go to the friendly local game shop and buy your game there.
Yeah. Maybe that's true.
I can believe that, yeah. I mean, I don't know. I've not got the insider knowledge of what local game stores have seen, but personally, I think that I'm along the same lines as John there. I think the local game store is primarily just a retail outlet is going to struggle when you can buy. I mean, we're going off Kickstarter topic here, but when you can buy a game online and not have to pay postage and packing, and it could be that, I can order a game on Amazon Prime, and Amazon is getting better for board games, but it's still not the best place. But I can order a game on Amazon Prime, and it can be with me tomorrow. Whereas
or probably
if I want to go buy
a slightly cheaper cost as well.
At usually, I think when I was looking at the other day, I like the look of Ethnos, and Ethnos was in the Toys and Game Shop in Worcester, which is a purely retail game shop. There was no play game space.
Yeah.
RRP £40. On Amazon, it was £31. And you're like, £9? Okay, that was the thing. I was there in that shop at that time, so there's part of me going, ooh, I could get it and I could unwrap it in cellophane. But if I was sitting at home and thinking, well, I've got to go to that game shop and buy it and travel there, it'd be no choice. It'd be one click and off you go.
Yeah.
But that's besides the point. We're talking about quick Kickstarters here. And quick starters. I don't, 32 Kickstarters over 4 years is not a huge amount compared to a lot of people.
Yeah.
So I'm a person that prefers to buy retail games a lot of the time because I prefer to see if the game has got legs before I spend my money
Yeah,
on it.
I'm very guilty of that.
What's the reviewer's hype? Even though we are, setting ourselves up as reviewers of games, I like to hear what other reviewers and what the hype is about a game before I think I'm going to buy it.
Yeah.
And in that regard, a lot of times, I mean, Thunderstone Quest I mentioned earlier, I didn't back that because I thought, well, it's going to come to retail anyway. I'm going to see what happens when it actually comes out. I may regret it. I may find that I would have to spend 150 quid to get what I could have got in the Kickstarter for 100 quid, but I'd still rather get it. Gloomhaven, I'm expecting Gloomhaven to arrive soon. Didn't back the first Kickstarter. It seemed like too much of a risk. Everyone played the first edition. Hype for it was high after people had played the game and people said it was amazing, and Paul Grogan plugging it in every single episode of his podcast.
Well, it must be good then if Paul likes it.
Well, yeah, he's very particular.
And he backs Gloomhaven and we back him. Therefore...
It's how you can fly around that diamond-encrusted helicopter.
Indeed. With a big P on the side. PG.
Tips.
Ha! Maybe that's his nickname.
Tips.
Just call him Tips from now on.
Tips. Right then, listeners, that's your job. Whenever you see Paul Grogan at a convention now, you've got to call him Tips.
Right, Tips.
And you have to walk around in a white coat and a flat cap.
Well, he's dressed up as squirrels. Was it a squirrel?
It was a squirrel, if that's a question, yeah. Right, I think it's time to draw this clip to an end, guys. So we didn't ask the question. Well, we haven't asked the question. Do we think what are the long-term effects of Kickstarter, and do we think there's a bubble? Let's wind it up with that.
Yeah, I mean, coming back to the bubble. I mean, you've mentioned. Is it going to have an effect on the local game store? Maybe in the short term, but as we've already touched on, well, I think we've mentioned that, £400 for a board game, things are going that way, but it won't last. It's not sustainable. So is there a bubble? Yeah, there must be. As you said, you've just said now, Steve, that people have only got a finite amount of money. And certainly in the UK, once Brexit, happens and everyone basically has to live on the street, people aren't going to be able to buy this stuff. Kickstarter's going to hit its threshold. CMON will hopefully realise that it is not an effective business model to charge £1 million for a lot of bling, even though some people will still pay for it. Is there going to be a bubble? Yes. What's the fallout of that bubble? That's the interesting question.
I don't think it's going to be a bubble in the sense that it's going to pop and then there'll be nothing.
No.
But I could certainly see it turning from a bubble where there's just enormously priced games and that's it, to an awful lot of smaller stuff starting to bubble up. Maybe you'll find Kickstarter as a whole starts to encourage people to put together better marketing stuff, or put together, maybe people will hear our podcast and think, if I just spend some more time showing the mechanics and how much fun it is to play, not that it's a fun game in the kiddie sense, in a interesting, fun kind of way. And there's enough bling that it's, it doesn't look like someone's just drawn it on their, their spare time for 5 minutes one evening and made 200 photocopies.
Sure. You've touched on an interesting point there, Mr. Cage, but I'll let Steve speak first.
I don't think it's going to burst like a bubble. I don't think it's a Kickstarter bubble. I can't remember the name of this theory, but it's a business theory, and the best example of this is airlines. So British Airways were kind of like your main airline in the UK, and they had several competitors, and what they did to differentiate themselves from the competitor is kept making the experience more of a luxury. So comfy seats, drinks, stewardesses, and with each of these things, incrementally over time, the price has increased. And the price increases so much that all of a sudden someone can come in and do the budget version. It's the same with food. It's the same with, when all the supermarkets and introduce like Tesco Value and all that kind of stuff. So like your Flybe and your Ryanair and your EasyJet came in and said, well, a flight to Malaga cost you £100 because you're paying for all this stuff you don't need. You don't need a drink on the plane. You don't need a movie. You don't need a stewardess attending to your every whim. You just want a seat, get on the plane, and go.
Yes, I do.
So that well,
You'll have to pay for it though, Andy.
Well, that's fine.
So they introduced EasyJet, which was cut down on all this extra stuff and significantly reduced the cost. Yep. And I think this is kind of what has happened a little bit with board games as a publisher thing. They've kept on getting more advanced as competition has increased, more luxury. Kickstarter came along and said, look, you can make this game that someone's made in their back room for £5. And over the last 5 years, we've got to the point where you've got your £400 to £500 Kickstarters because they keep upping the luxury value. It's more miniatures, it's more bling. And it's following this. The trend of games on Kickstarter is following this model of the British Airways almost exactly.
Yeah, that's a fair point.
So what's going to come in? So is something else is going to come in that basically says, again, right, here's the Kickstarter made in someone's back room.
Trevor in his shed.
Sorry, here's the board game that's been made in this back room. Here's this fantastic board game, and here's how we're going to deliver it to you.
That's exactly what I meant by froth. I'm all about the froth recently for some reason. Yeah, the smaller bits and pieces filling that gap is exactly the sort of thing that I was talking about.
Yeah, it might not be Kickstarter. It might not be that it might not be that, say, for instance, the bubble burst on Kickstarter. I'm on about something else will come along and deliver games to us.
Yeah. A pre-Kickstarter almost.
No.
Back to what Kickstarter was originally. Oh, that sort of thing.
I think it's going to be something completely different.
Oh, really?
I don't know what it is. Yeah, I'm not, because crowdfunding is going this way, and I think the success of things like Rising Sun and Dark Souls. Dark Souls is the biggest Kickstarter in UK ever. Seventh Continent made $7 million. You can say it's the bubbles are going to burst, but when a company's just made $7 million got deposited into that company's bank account in one day.
I bet they went out the following day and got absolutely shit-faced.
Exactly, and I think what's going to happen is something else is going to come. We had normal publishers, we had Kickstarter, and I think there's something else which will come along, and it might be rapid prototyping, it might be something, I don't know what it is, but something will come along and change the way we look at board games again.
Right then, thinking caps on.
Yeah, it's interesting. I just want to, I don't want to spend too much time on this because obviously we're running out of time, but one thing you did mention, John, as you touched on it inadvertently, is the commercial nous of a lot of Kickstarter projects. One thing it has highlighted, something Steve and I have talked about offline, is the almost comical naivety of a lot of people on Kickstarter.
In the backers or the publishers?
Both, actually. In that a lot of would-be publishers haven't got a Scooby-Doo about how to actually run a business, how to actually get something marketed and into the commercial world, how the real world works. And as a mirror of that, a lot of backers as customers are like, well, you should do this and this and this, and we want this and this and this and this. Why are you doing that? Because it's a business decision. It comes back to the discussion we had before about releasing stuff at Essen. It's a business decision. The company needs money to survive. There's good reasons for some of the companies doing what they're doing. You might not like it as a customer, but there's a bloody good reason they're doing it, because they need cash flow, they need marketing, they need commercial, whatever the hell it is. But it is hilarious to see a lot of people, especially a lot of discussions on Facebook groups, of the naivety of how the real world works, how these commercial entities exist. They do what they're doing for a bloody good reason, and the newcomers to this game are getting caught out quite severely by thinking, oh, we can just go along and do this, it'll be fine, we'll get 1 million backers. No, you won't. The real world is harsh.
So, I think that's about time we round up this discussion.
I would say so. Hopefully we've covered everything there.
I think we've covered everything. So, thank you very much for listening, folks. This has been our Kickstarter discussion. I really am glad that we did this as a separate episode, because we've talked for nearly 2 hours.
2 hours, Jesus!
You know what's scary is that by doing several podcasts back to back, we've now done almost 6 hours of talking.
Wow. 6 man hours.
And now John is attacking the fourth wall with a jackhammer.
Gone again.
Thank you very much for listening. We have been Polyhedron Collider. I'm Steve Tudor.
I've been Andy.
And I've been John Cage.
Thank you very much for listening. We will be back in a couple of weeks with some more gaming chat. But
And
for
probably
now,
a lot more shite.
more gaming chat and more rabbit holes.
Just the way you like it.
Bye for now.
Good night, folks.
Ta-ra.